This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 445, part 2, entitled Masculism as Abolitionism, carrying straight on. To masculists, fluffydom, that is being a fluffy, is manslavery, and to masculists, to have one's masculist consciousness raised is effectively to see manslavery as slavery, and hence something to be hated. So masculists are like negro slavery abolitionists. They aim to wipe out the institution of manslavery by wiping out the fluffies. Fortunately for the masculists, men have the financial power to be able to do this, since men are socialized to be fips, so do not depend on women to parasite off in order to stay alive financially. So men, that is masculists, are in a position to force women to grow up, to fip up, since a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible, stupid, ignorant, manslavable man. But thanks to the masculists and MGTOWs, the supply of such men is drying up, since the men's libbers, in brackets, masculists, MGTOWs, MRAs, that's men's rights activists, are now heftily preaching to young men not to marry, not to have kids, due to the awful toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, in brackets, who want equal rights with men in the parliaments, but reject equal obligations with men to share equally the burden of earning the living by bothering to get career-competent educations at high school and college, so that they become financially responsible fips as adults, and not manslave a man for decades, as the hated fluffies do, in brackets. In previous generations, fathers got to keep their kids. But since the 70s, they now face a 1 in 4 chance, if they become fathers, of losing them. In capital letters, 1 chance in 4. Everyone knows that in modern Western countries, the divorce rate is now 1 in 2. That is, half of marriages fail. What is less known is that in half of those divorces, the ex-wife turns into a vindictive feminazi bitch, out to financially crucify her ex-husband, in quotes, "for all she can get." Fortunately for her, she is able to, since the divorce courts had been taken over by the fluffy feminists, that is, feminists who still had traditional fluffy expectations of men, seeing men as cash machines who exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies. So she ends up with custody of the kids, his house, half his wealth, half his stuff, child payments from him, and often alimony for life, so she can sit back for the rest of her fat, lazy, fluffy life and continue to manslave her ex-husband until he dies. Very nice for fluffies, and for fluffy feminist-controlled divorce courts, who have the legislated power to commit such massive gender crimes against men, and on such a massive scale. 1 father in 4. 5 exclamation marks. It's no wonder that the masculists see such close analogies between negro slavery and manslavery, but there are certain differences. For example, the manslavery issue is hugely larger. In the US, the percentage of Negro slaves compared to the total population was under 10%, whereas men make up 50% of the population, a hugely larger problem. Most women, if they are feminists in their outlook, are monoconscious feminists, that is, by definition, they know nothing about masculinist ideas. They still have traditional expectations of men, seeing men as cash machines to be abused and robbed in the divorce courts to support women, since that is what the traditional role of a man is. This is the mentality of most women today, even feminists, who are as ignorant of masculinist ideas as are traditional fluffies. Thus, to liberate men, the masculists have a major task ahead of them, that is to wipe manslavery off the face of the earth by wiping fluffies off the face of the earth, by forcing them to rot on the shelf, utterly ignored by men, not even pumped and dumped by men, that is, masculistic men, who in time will be most men, as masculist ideas spread across the planet. Masculists have a whole political, social, psychological, legal agenda to create a FIP society, putting powerful moral pressure on girls to FIP up or not get a boyfriend. And worst, to be spat at for being a hated fluffie, to be shunned socially and sexually. The masculists see clearly that men need an ideology, an ism, that powerfully motivates men to push for social and political change. Masculists aim to put a masculist group in every high school, every campus, so that young men are in a position to put powerful moral pressure on women to FIP up, to stop studying fluffy crap majors and instead to study career competent majors, so that when a young man is considering a young woman as a potential girlfriend, that this woman be seen as a FIP and not as a hated, man-slaving parasite who deserve to rot on the shelf, spat at by men and society. Masculists push politically for the men-fairing of the gender laws, especially in the divorce courts, which are screaming out for reform. For example, throwing out alimony, giving custody of the kids jointly to both parents by default, seeing the divorcing wives as FIPs who are quite capable of paying their own way and not expecting them to be hated, fluffy, man-slaving parasites. The para needs to be legislated, that is, paternity rejection right. The male equivalent of the MARA equals maternity rejection right, aka abortion right, the absence of which is the greatest form of sexual discrimination that exists, and it's not against women but against men. The fact that there is no para shows clearly what women really think of men, that is, as cash machines to serve women. When the masculists really push hard for the legislation of the para, we will see women's true feelings about men, that is, that men are seen as cash machines to pay for women. We will see the true parasitic nature of women, who evolved to be parasites of men. Men evolved to understand and manipulate the world, and women evolved to manipulate men, since women have always been parasites of men. Women couldn't hunt, couldn't plough, couldn't fight, since they were stuck at home looking after helpless infants, depending on their vaginas, which were in sexual heat all days of the month, to be better able to bribe men with sex, to extract scarce male-hunted meat from men. Women evolved to sexploit men. The human female is the sexiest of mammals, being in sexual heat every day of the month, unlike female monkeys or dogs, who are only sexually in heat seasonally. The masculists aim to create gender equality committees in the parliaments, whose role it will be to address both feminist and masculist issues equally, which is far from being the case today, since most feminists are monoconscious and see gender oppression as a one-way street. These committees will consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists. So the task of the male masculist gender politicians in these committees will be to implement the men-fairing of the gender laws, and most importantly, to play a leading role in the wiping out of fluffy man-slavery by wiping out fluffydom, making it so hated by both sexes that few women will dare state publicly that they approve of fluffydom, so those that do will go underground, where they will slowly die off, utterly rejected and spat at by masculists and female masculists, since in time most women will, along with the masculists, see fluffydom as manslavery and will hate it as much as do the masculists. Since the male half of these committees are male, they will be smarter and a lot more aggressive than their female feminist counterparts, for the usual masculists emphasise genetic superiority of males, with their 10% larger brains, their 4 IQ points greater average IQ than women, their 10 times greater testosterone levels than women, so are much more aggressive, ambitious, dogged and persistent. The masculists in these committees will be very energetic and effective in putting enormous moral pressure on women to FIP up, to acquire real economic skills that will make them true FIPs, so that manslavery can be wiped off the face of the earth without a horrible sex war, equivalent to the US Civil War in the 1860s that killed over 500,000 US soldiers. The masculists are abolitionists, out to free men from manslavery by forcing women to get off their fat parasitic asses and fip up, or be severely punished by not getting a man. As masculinist ideas are taken up by the media and spread to the masses, millions of women will see the sense and morality of masculism and become convinced female masculists. When both sexes are strongly masculist, then fluffiedom will die out. The gender laws would be men-fed, and men can be freed from manslavery. Otherwise, so many young men will continue to reject marriage and paternity that we wipe ourselves out. Thus, the ordinary politicians will soon be forced to take the masculists seriously, since the masculists have the power, through their rejection of marriage and paternity, to wipe out whole populations by causing the birth rate to crash, as is happening now, particularly in Seoul, the capital of South Korea, where the birth rate, that is, the number of children born per woman, is now at a catastrophic low of 0.64. Kid you not. To have one's masculinist consciousness raised is essentially to see fluffiedom as manslavery, and to see manslavery as slavery, which is to be hated. Masculists hate fluffies, and hate fluffy feminists even more so, since it's bad enough that fluffy feminists are fluffies and hence manslavers, but they are also hypocrites. The aim of masculists is to see everyone become bi-conscious by teaching everyone masculists' ideas. The freeing of men from manslavery begins with education. Society needs to be made bi-conscious. That is the role of masculist educators like myself. We need to get the masculist message out. Journalists, if you are listening/reading this, then please get the masculist message out. You will be playing a historical role in freeing men, half the world's population, from manslavery, liberating them from being manslaves to fluffy parasites, fat, lazy women who expect to live off the money and labour of a man. A massive, decades-lasting gender crime against men, worthy of severe punishment, that is a slow death, by being totally ignored by men, not even pumped and dumped, so that fluffies are effectively exterminated by being forced to rot on the shelf, thus removing their fluffy parasite genes from the gene pool, forcing them to live miserable lives, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and totally rejected, a fate worthy of a fluffy manslaver. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 440 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.